The Åland Islands or Åland is an autonomous, demilitarised, monolingually Swedish-speaking region of Finland that consists of an archipelago lying at the entrance to the Gulf of Bothnia in the Baltic Sea. Collectively, the islands in the archipelago form the smallest region of Finland, constituting 0.49% of its land area and 0.50% of its population. Åland comprises Fasta Åland and a further 6,500 skerries and islands to its east. Fasta Åland is separated from the coast of Sweden by 38 kilometres of open water to the west. In the east, the Åland archipelago is contiguous with the Finnish Archipelago Sea. Åland's only land border is located on the uninhabited skerry of Märket, which it shares with Sweden. Åland's autonomous status means that those provincial powers normally exercised by representatives of the central Finnish government are largely exercised by its own government. Autonomy. The autonomous status of the islands was affirmed by a decision made by the League of Nations in 1921 following the Åland crisis. It was reaffirmed within the treaty admitting Finland to the European Union. By law, Åland is politically neutral and entirely demilitarised, and residents are exempt from conscription to the Finnish Defence Forces. The islands were granted extensive autonomy by the Parliament of Finland in the Act on the Autonomy of Åland of 1920, which was later replaced by new legislation by the same name in 1951 and 1991. Åland remains exclusively Swedish-speaking by law. In connection with Finland's admission to the European Union, a protocol was signed concerning the Åland Islands that stipulates, among other things, that provisions of the European Community Treaty shall not force a change of the existing restrictions for foreigners in Åland, to acquire and hold real property or to provide certain services. Etymology: Åland's original name was in Proto-Norse language älvland, which means land of water. In Swedish, this first developed into Åland and eventually into Åland, literally riverland even though rivers are not a prominent feature of Åland's geography. The Finnish name of the island, Ahvenanmaa, is seen to preserve another form of the old name. Another theory suggests that the Finnish Ahvenanmaa would be the original name of the archipelago, from which the Swedish Åland derives. History. The Åland Islands formed part of the territory ceded to Russia by Sweden under the Treaty of Frederikshamn in September 1809. As a result, along with all other parts of Finland, they became part of the semi-autonomous Grand Duchy of Finland. During this process, Sweden failed to secure a provision that the islands not be fortified. The issue was important not only for Sweden but also for the United Kingdom, which was concerned that a military presence on the islands could threaten Britain's military and commercial interests. In 1832, Russia started to fortify the islands with the great fortress of Bomarsund. A combined British and French force of warships and marines captured and destroyed the fortress in 1854 as part of the campaign in the Baltic during the Crimean War. The 1856 Treaty of Paris demilitarized the entire Åland Islands archipelago. During the Finnish Civil War, in 1918, Swedish troops intervened as a peacekeeping force between the Russian troops stationed on the islands and White and Red Finnish troops who came from Finland over the Frozen Sea. Within weeks, the Swedish troops gave way to German troops who occupied Åland by request of the White Senate of Finland. After 1917, the residents of the islands worked towards having them ceded to Sweden. In 1919, a petition for secession from Finland and integration with Sweden was signed by 96.4% of the voters on the islands, with over 95% in favour, although serious questions later arose regarding this extraordinarily high figure. Swedish nationalist sentiments had grown strong particularly as a result of the following issues: anti-Swedish tendencies in Finland, Finnish nationalism fueled by Finland's struggle to retain its autonomy, and the Finnish resistance against Russification. In addition, the conflict between the Swedish-speaking minority and the Finnish-speaking majority, which since the 1840s had been prominent in Finland's political life, contributed to the Åland population's apprehension about its future in Finland. Finland, however, declined to cede the islands and instead offered them an autonomous status. Nevertheless, the residents did not approve the offer, and the dispute over the islands was submitted to the League of Nations. the latter decided that Finland should retain sovereignty over the province but that the Åland Islands should be made an autonomous territory. Thus Finland was obliged to ensure the residents of the Åland Islands the right to maintain the Swedish language, as well as their own culture and local traditions. At the same time, an international treaty established the neutral status of Åland, prohibiting the placing of military installations or forces on the islands. In the course of the 20th century, increasing numbers of the islanders have perceived Finnish sovereignty as benevolent and even beneficial. The combination of disappointment about insufficient support from Sweden in the League of Nations, Swedish disrespect for Åland's demilitarised status in the 1930s, and some feelings of a shared destiny with Finland during and after World War II has changed the islanders' perception of Åland's relation to Finland from a Swedish province in Finnish possession to an autonomous part of Finland. The islanders enjoyed safety at sea during World War II, as their merchant fleet sailed for both the Allied countries and Germany. Consequently, Åland shipping was not generally attacked as each side rarely knew which cargo was being carried to whom. Finland marked the 150th anniversary of demilitarization of the Åland Islands by issuing a high-value commemorative coin, the A5 150th anniversary of demilitarization of Åland Islands commemorative coin, minted in 2006. The obverse depicts a pine tree, very typical in the Åland Islands. The reverse design features a boat's stern and rudder, with a dove perched on the tiller, a symbol of 150 years of peace. Politics. The Åland Islands are governed according to the Act on the Autonomy of Åland and international treaties. These laws guarantee the islands' autonomy from Finland, which has ultimate sovereignty over them, as well as a demilitarised status. The government of Åland, Ålandskapsregering, answers to the Parliament of Åland, Ålagting, in accordance with the principles of parliamentarism. Åland has its own flag, has issued its own postage stamp since 1984, runs its own police force, and is a member of the Nordic Council. Since 2005 the Åland Islands also have had their own airline, Air Åland. The islands are demilitarised, and their population is exempt from conscription. Although Åland's autonomy preceded the creation of the regions of Finland, the autonomous government of Åland also has responsibility for the functions undertaken by Finland's regional councils. Åland is a member of the small European Postal Administration cooperation. The islands are considered to be a separate entity for amateur radio purposes and have their own call sign prefix granted by Finland, ʻoːa. The Åland Islands are guaranteed representation in the Finnish Parliament, to which they elect one representative. Åland also has a different system of political parties from the mainland. Home education has effectively been banned by the Swedish government in 2011, but is allowed by the Finnish government. Due to the island's close proximity to Sweden and because the island is Swedish-speaking, a number of Swedish homeschooling families have moved from the Swedish mainland to Åland, including Jonas Himmelstrand, the chairman of the Swedish Association for Homeschooling. Administration. The State Department of Åland represents the Finnish central government and performs many administrative duties. It has a somewhat different function from the other regional administrative agencies, owing to its autonomy. Prior to 2010, the state administration was handled by the Åland State Provincial Office. Åland has its own postal administration but still uses the Finnish 5-digit postal code system, using the number range 22,000 to 22,999, with the prefix AX. The lowest numbered postal code is for the capital Mariehamn, AX 22,100, and the highest AX 22,950 for Jamo. Municipalities. Geography. The Åland Islands occupy a position of strategic importance, as they command one of the entrances to the port of Stockholm, as well as the approaches to the Gulf of Bothnia, in addition to being situated near the Gulf of Finland. The Åland archipelago consists of nearly 300 habitable islands, of which about 80 are inhabited. The remainder are merely some 6,000 skerries and desolate rocks. The archipelago is connected to Åland archipelago in the east, the archipelago adjacent to the southwest coast of Finland. Together they form the Archipelago Sea. To west from Åland is Sea of Åland and to north the Bothnian Sea. The surface of the islands is generally rocky and the soil, thin. There are several harbours. The island's landmass occupies a total area of 1,527 square kilometres. 90% of the population live on Fasta Åland, which is also the site of the capital town of Märket. Fasta Åland is the largest island in the archipelago, extending over 1,010 km2, more than 66% of the province's land area. It measures approximately 47 kilometers from north to south and 34 kilometers from east to west. During the ʻoːland crisis, the parties sought support from different maps of the islands. On the Swedish map, the most densely populated main island dominated, and many skerries were left out. On the Finnish map, a lot of smaller islands or skerries were, for technical reasons, given a slightly exaggerated size. The Swedish map made the islands appear to be closer to the mainland of Sweden than to Finland. The Finnish map stressed the continuity of the archipelago between the main island and mainland Finland, while a greater gap appeared between the islands and the archipelago on the Swedish side. Although both Finns and Swedes of course argued for their respective interpretations, in retrospect it is hard to say that one is more correct than the other. One consequence is the oft-repeated number of over 6,000 skerries that was given authority by the outcome of the arbitration. Economy. Åland's economy is heavily dominated by shipping, trade and tourism. Shipping represents about 40% of the economy, with several international carriers owned and operated off Åland. Most companies aside from shipping are small, with fewer than 10 employees. Farming and fishing are important in combination with the food industry. A few high-profile technology companies contribute to a prosperous economy. Wind power is rapidly developing, aiming at reversing the direction in the cables to the mainland in coming years. In December 2011, wind power accounted for 31.48% of Åland's total electricity usage. The main ports are Märket, Bergen and ʻoːland currency S on the eastern shore of the main island. Märket was the base for the last large oceanic commercial sailing ships in the world. Their final tasks were bringing Australian wheat to Great Britain, on which Åland ship owner Gustav Eriksson kept going until after WW2, 1947 being his last year. The ships latterly made only one round trip from South Australia to Britain per year after each marathon voyage, going back to Märket to lay up for a few months. The ship Åmån, now a museum in Märket, was one of these last vessels. The abolition of tax-free sales on ferry boats travelling between destinations within the European Union made Finland demand an exception for the Åland Islands on EU's VAT rules. The exception allows for maintained tax-free sales on the ferries between Sweden and Finland and at the airport, but has also made Åland a different tax zone, meaning that tariffs must be levied on goods brought to the islands. Unemployment is well below that of surrounding regions, 1.8% in 2004. Due to the change in global economy, the unemployment rate has since risen to 3.9% in January 2014. The Finnish state collects taxes, duties and fees also in Åland. In return, the Finnish government places a sum of money at the disposal of the Åland Parliament. The sum is 0.45% of total government income, excluding government loans. If the sum paid to the Finnish state exceeds 0.5%, then any amount above that will go back to the Parliament of Åland as diligence money. In 2010, the amount of taxes paid by Åland Islanders was 0.65% of the total taxes paid in Finland. According to Eurostat, in 2006 Åland was the 20th wealthiest of the EU's 268 regions, and the wealthiest in Finland, with a GDP per inhabitant 47% above the EU mean. While the official currency is the euro, the Swedish krona also circulates freely in Åland. Demographics. Births and deaths, ethnicity and language. Most inhabitants have Swedish as their first language, 90.2% in 2009, and 5.0% speak Finnish. The language of instruction in publicly financed schools is Swedish. The issue of the ethnicity of the Ålanders, and the correct linguistic classification of their language, remains somewhat sensitive and controversial. They may be considered either ethnic Swedes or Swedish-speaking Finns, but their language is closer to the adjacent dialects in Sweden, that is Upper Currency NDSKA, than to adjacent dialects of Finland Swedish. See Languages of Sweden. Regional citizenship or the right of domicile is a prerequisite for the right to vote or stand as a candidate in elections to the Legislative Assembly, to own and hold real estate situated in unplanned areas of a land. Religion. The majority of the population, 82.1%, belongs to the Evangelical Lutheran Church. The Åland Islands contain Finland's oldest Christian churches, including the Church of St. Olaf in Jomala, which dating from the late 13th century is likely to be the oldest in Finland. The Åland Islands' largest church is the Church of St. George in Sund, dating from shortly after. Sport. Åland competes in the biennial Island Games, which it hosted in 1991 and 2009. Åland United and IFK Mariamne are the island's leading football clubs. See also: Outline of the Åland Islands, Index of Åland Islands related articles, Bibliography of the Åland Islands, Åland crisis, Åland Islands national football team, Åland Swedische languages of Åland, Flag of Åland, Government of Åland, Heraldry of Åland, Provincial Governors of Finland, Public holidays in Åland, Transport on the Åland Islands. References. External links: Wikimedia Atlas of Åland, Swedish, åland. Tourist Guide to Åland, Åland in brief, Swedish, Government of Åland, Parliament of Åland, Act on the Autonomy of Åland, B7 Baltic Islands Network, The Example of Åland, Autonomy as a Minor Protector, Åland Tourist Gateway, Åland Official Tourist Gateway, Ålandsbanken, Posten Åland €, The Post Office of Åland, Ålandstidningen,